You're watching Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview. Our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. First, though, our top stories here tonight. And a leading investment firm is warning of an existential risk from climate change ahead of the release of a UN report that's found businesses could lose nearly £1 trillion because of inaction. Prince Charles has expressed his deep regret at being deceived by the shamed paedophile Bishop Peter Ball after an inquiry described their friendship as misguided. And broadcaster Danny Baker has been sacked by the BBC after tweeting a picture comparing the new royal baby to a chimpanzee. He told Sky News his post was ridiculous, stupid and idiotic. Hello there, you're watching the press preview. Our first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. Over the next half an hour, we're going to be talking through the headlines with the Observer's chief lead writer, Sonia Sodha, and the political journalist, Isabel Oakeshott. So a very good evening to both of you. So let's take a look then at those front pages. And the Metro leads with the sacking of the BBC radio presenter Danny Baker after he sent a tweet comparing the new royal baby, who's mixed race, to a chimpanzee. The Daily Mail carries criticism of Prince Charles following the public inquiry into the paedophile Bishop Peter Ball, which said the royals' actions could have been interpreted as support. According to a report in The Guardian, 5 men have been murdered in Jamaica after being deported from the UK to the island by the Home Office. The Daily Telegraph leads on an announcement from the Home Office that it's launching a review into charges for 101 on emergency calls. The Financial Times reports that China's biggest technology groups have been granted approval to start digital banks in Hong Kong. So still a few papers to come in, I think. Sometimes when the football's on, the papers come in late, but we'll try and bring those as they come in. Sonia Sodha and Isabel Oakeshott are here, though, to take us through the ones that we have got. And you've picked out the front page of The Guardian, first of all, and they are suggesting that there's a new row over, as they describe it, deportation flights. What is it that they are suggesting has happened?
So what The Guardian's uncovered is that there have been a number of deportations to Jamaica as part of the government's hostile environment policy, which it's come under a lot of criticism for from all sides. And what The Guardian has uncovered, colleagues at The Guardian, is that, the Home Office doesn't track what happens to people that it deports, but through its own investigations, The Guardian has found that 5 men who were deported to Jamaica have been murdered. And I think there's a number of concerns about this. The first is that we know that the Home Office has absolutely incompetent bureaucracy. And through the Windrush scandal, we know that they've deported people who are actually legally resident here in Britain. And that's incredibly shocking, I think. So people have been wrongfully deported. Secondly, we know they're going after and deporting people who, young people who've grown up in Britain since they were, young children, may have very minor offences in their past, like minor marijuana offences. And sometimes these young men are getting essentially detained for crimes that they may have committed in their past and put on a plane in the middle of the night to countries like Jamaica and Nigeria that they don't know. And then thirdly, the Home Office does have a duty, even if we're talking about some quite hardened criminals here who may pose a threat to the British public. The Home Office does have, the government has an obligation in terms of what happens to people that it deports. And the murder rate in Jamaica is many, many, many times higher than here in the UK. And in particular, there's a suggestion that people coming off flights, charter flights, who've been deported to Jamaica, people locally know that these are people who don't know the country. They may not have any family there, for example. Their connections there may be incredibly tenuous. And so there's some evidence that these people might be getting targeted as being sort of very vulnerable and, as victims of crime. So I think it's a really concerning story on many counts.
So I don't think many people in this country will be that concerned about it. My heart's not bleeding. I think it's quite right that there should be a hostile environment for foreign criminals. The government's position on this has been clear for a long time. If you are not you don't have full rights to be here in the first place and you commit a serious crime, you can expect to be sent back from where you came.
And I think the vast majority... It's very minor drug charges 10 years ago.
In the case that your own paper has highlighted, they are talking about serious and violent crime here.
Some cases, but not all. So we know some people have been
perfectly
deported.
legitimate for them not to be here. I mean, you can't expect to commit a series of crimes or violent crime here, and if you are not from the UK, to remain in the UK. I think that's taking our so-called obligations too far.
But some of these people may have moved here as very young children with their parents, grown up here, attended British schools. And then do you think if, say, a young man's got a marijuana charge from when he was, say, 15, that, 10 years later he should be putting on a flight to Jamaica in the middle of the night?
But that's not
that's good. But that is some of the stuff that The Guardian has exposed. So I'm glad
in this
you agree
case,
on
we're
that.
talking about people who've committed serious and violent crimes. And honestly, there's no secret about this policy. The government has been really firm on it for very many years now. And I think voters expect to see that enacted. We should not be a place that provides succour and comfort to foreign criminals. And for far too long, we have been tolerating this. We've been keeping people here who don't belong here, who have committed violent crimes. And that is outrageous.
I think when you're talking about people who've grown up in Britain, who've been to school in Britain, we actually have an obligation to them, and we should be treating them like, criminals who are UK citizens. Lots of them may have moved here with their parents and then not claimed British citizenship for whatever reason. It's become incredibly expensive if you moved here as a young child to sort of legalise your status when you get older. We're talking tens of thousands of pounds, multiple applications to a very, very bureaucratic Home Office for temporary leave to remain. So I think a lot of what The Guardian's uncovered, actually, around Windrush, around the hostile environment, is that people who really should not be bearing the brunt of this policy have been targeted.
OK, and I've just scanning that front page. I can't see any response from the Home Office in that copy there, but it'd be interesting to see what their reaction is.
I think the story goes on. I mean, actually, it doesn't look like much of a row to me. All you've done is wheeled out one lawyer who specialises in defending these people to say, oh, it's not a very good idea. So at the moment, there's no great political row over this. I don't think that, in the Commons there are lots of people standing up and making the case to keep foreign murderers in the UK.
I mean, I don't know that we're talking foreign murderers, actually.
OK, let's move on to another issue. Inside the Daily Mail tomorrow, there's a story on page 2. They talk about an expenses cheat MP, and this is a Tory MP who's admitted making a false expenses claim. So talk us through why you particularly wanted to pick this out.
Well, we picked this out because I think at the moment there's a real atmosphere of anger and public mistrust of MPs. And this unfortunate MP has been in a lot of trouble in recent months over a particular expenses claim, which I believe there has been a very formal investigation into. That's not what this story is about. It's a sort of another angle on it, saying that he claimed £30 for this very pretty hanging basket outside his office. Actually, in the grand scheme of fraudulent or outrageous expenses claims, it's not that big a deal. There have been many, many worse examples. I think why this is interesting to people at the moment is because of the atmosphere, the public mood about politicians, and the failure, dare I mention, Brexit, to deliver Brexit is really fueling an extraordinary sense of betrayal on the part of the political classes, and a real feeling that our politicians no longer are of the calibre and the kind of integrity that voters want to see.
And it's some time ago, of course, since the expenses scandal. Was there a feeling then, when everyone was so shocked by the revelations, that things would really change? And what do you think the perceptions are like now?
I think there was sort of a real feeling of shock within Westminster, because I think there was a sort of culture of, well, maybe it's not strictly by the book, but everyone else is doing it, so why shouldn't I? And then I think when it was exposed 10 years ago, people were genuinely kind of shocked at the sort of reaction, I suppose, from the public. So I think that really was a warning to MPs. And actually, I think the fact that there hasn't been that much about expenses in the press over the last 10 years really is testament to that changed culture, I suppose. But I would just add, I think actually coming back to what Isabel was saying about, voter perceptions and trust in politicians, I would agree that it's low at the moment. But I think actually there's anger on all sides. It's not just Leave voters feeling betrayed on Brexit. If you look at the local elections, actually on all sides, the two main parties were delivered a real drubbing. And I think partly that is also Remain voters, people who backed remaining in the European Union, feeling quite angry that actually they haven't got a party that's speaking for their interests. And you saw swings in, the commuter belt from the Conservatives to Lib Dems. You You saw even in Labour Leave areas swings from Labour to parties like, again, the Lib Dems and the Greens. So I think I think the only thing uniting the country at the moment is a sense that politics isn't delivering and anger on all sides,
they're all
really.
letting us down.
Yeah, exactly.
So interesting to see how that manifests itself in the next lot of elections, which of course the European elections coming up soon. Let's turn to page 10 of the Mail now. There's a story here about Penny Mordaunt. So what does this tell us?
So Penny Mordaunt is our new Defence Secretary, the first female Defence Secretary, and she is taking a stand on the very, very long-running outrage, which is the persecution of our veterans over historic allegations of abuse. So this is where retired service personnel get a knock on the door or a horrible letter through the post saying that they're under investigation over some allegation, very often trumped up from some distant time in the past where they've had to make a difficult split-second decision, often during a combat situation, and they're now being pursued over whether they went too far with that decision in that very, very difficult battle environment. And successive defence secretaries have tried to tackle this, and they've all recently, you know, the most recent one, Gavin Williamson, who Penny Mordaunt replaced, and his predecessor, Michael Fallon, and everyone who went before him in recent times has vowed that they are going to stop this happening. You know, the people I think voters are very, very uncomfortable with the persecution of those who've put their lives on the line for this. I'm just sceptical as to how she thinks she can fix it when so many others have failed.
I mean, I think it's genuinely a really tricky issue. I think there's a lot of agreement that the system as it works isn't really working, you know, for everyone involved. But I also think it's tricky because people who serve the armed forces, they're not above the law. They have to behave legally on the battlefield. And, you know, there have been cases in the past. So, for example, we've seen Soldier F charged now with 2 murders during Bloody Sunday. Now, that was a long time ago, but murder is a very serious crime. And if there's, the prosecution service have said there is enough evidence to charge someone with murder, I don't think that there's, I don't think that former soldiers and veterans should be above the law. That said, there absolutely needs to be a system that means that they can't be sort of hounded vexatiously many years after the fact. So you've got to strike a balance here, I think.
OK, on that note, we are going to take a break. Don't go away, lots to talk about coming up, including our children getting enough playtime at school. We're going to be talking about that after our own break and run around in the playground. Welcome back. You're watching the press preview. With me tonight, Sonia Sodha and Isabel Oakeshott. And we'll get stuck into some more papers in just a moment. But first, I want to bring you a little bit of breaking news because Chelsea has become the 4th English team to make it through to European finals this week. They have beaten Eintracht Frankfurt in a penalty shootout. That will take them to the Europa League final, where they'll meet Arsenal, who won their match earlier on this evening, beating Valencia. The 4th English team, Liverpool, Spurs, Arsenal, and now Chelsea, all making it to the finals of European football tournaments. So many celebrations all round. I'm not so much sure how many celebrations there are in the studio. You don't look
We're really glad that you did that for us.
We'll move swiftly on then, shall we? We're going to start this section with the front page of the Metro. And on their front page is Danny Baker. It says, Baker Chimp Tweet shame. Danny Baker fired today over a tweet.
So Danny Baker is a very well-known 5 Live presenter for the BBC. Did a really shocking tweet yesterday, actually. I think a lot of people weren't just quite sure what to make of it when they saw it at first, because it pictured 2 very well-dressed people with a little chimp in between them. And it turned out that he was tweeting this in reference to Harry and Meghan introducing their new royal baby to the world. So, I mean, it was a racist tweet. I mean, depicting a mixed-race baby as a chimp. Not much more to say about it. I think 5 Live were right and the BBC were absolutely right to sack him. He did issue an apology last night, but then when he got sacked by the BBC this morning, he sort of appeared to double down a bit and say that he'd been thrown under a bus by them. But I think the BBC have done exactly the right thing. It's just a shocking tweet and has no that kind of racism just has no place in this day and age.
And I understand that he's been claiming that he didn't mean it, or he didn't know that...
He said he didn't... He wanted to make a joke about class. He called it a stupid thinking gag, didn't he? He said he had no racist intentions, but he has apologised.
In that case, in my opinion, he should be sacked for sheer stupidity. I mean, some people are clearly not bright enough to be in the jobs that they're in if they think that a tweet like that at a time like this isn't going to cause big problems. So I agree with Sonia. Honestly, what is there to say? The guy's a chump. You know, he should be sacked, absolutely.
OK, let's move on to the front page of the Daily Telegraph next. They've got a story about playtime in school.
So there's been a big survey of schools, and apparently what's happened over the last sort of 20 years is that the amount of break time has been squeezed. So back in 1995, 41% of secondary schools had breaks in the afternoon. Today, it's only 1% of schools. Neither Isabel or I could remember having an afternoon break.
Yeah.
But also lunch breaks apparently are getting squeezed. What I was quite shocked by was that there's a quarter of schools reported lunch breaks of 35 minutes or less. Now, that does seem a bit mean.
You'd have to like bolt your food down,
yeah,
and then there's not
would.
Actually much time to play.
Yeah,
Or after.
And play is really
well,
important.
Yes, I mean, how important is it? Some might say, well, they need to crack on and get learning.
That's actually what I said when we were discussing it, but I was being slightly facetious. That was a bit of a stupid thing to say. I think I don't really have that strong of views on this. It didn't I was sort of surprised to see that on the front of the Telegraph. It feels like they were a bit short on
maybe
stories. It does feel a bit like that. It's a bit kind of meh, isn't it?
Well, I noticed that it's anti-obesity campaigners that are worried about it particularly, aren't they? Because clearly they feel that at least some exercise gets done in break times.
Well, but it doesn't. But it also
yeah.
doesn't. This isn't telling you that they don't have more PE lessons.
Yes,
I mean,
exactly. I mean, that's what's really going to tackle obesity. And in fact, I mean, I would expect that as children get older, they're more sedentary during their break times. Anyway, certainly we were at school. Like, you know, when it came to sort of when you were 15, you'd sort of sit around having
by the
a gossip.
radiator.
Yeah, exactly, rather than running around playing it in the school playground. So yeah.
I don't know if we've got time to look at the front page of The Guardian, have we?
It's a super quick one. David Beckham banned from driving for using his mobile phone at the wheel.
Yeah, no one's above the law. So,
not even David.
So maybe that's a lesson to people, that you do get prosecuted for using your mobile phone.
Loads of people still do it.
Yeah, you do see a lot of people, don't you?
A lot, yeah.
Anyway, we are out of time, but well done for squeezing that one in.
Super speedy, so to speak.
Exactly.
See how I did that?
Isabel and Sonia, we'll see you again at 11:30. Thank you.